Work thus amount in the remain to an exposition of the principles and problems of foreign policy and hierarchical system, each member of which determines upon action in the light of his inferior and superior status. The doctrine of the upayas, by contrast, is one of the application of the political influence techniques, pure and simple. It is unrelated to hierarchical considerations and does not therefore figure importantly in this analysis. It might have been more prominent if the model type of the relationship was that between equal powers, the circle of states. Used as we are to holding theories of international relations upon the axiom of equality of states, we may find it surprising to what length Kautilya could carry his descriptions and his prescriptions by developing the implications of status differences. However, the study of international relations cannot fail to attend to relations between the equals, for it is there that it enters a province peculiarly its own. The theoretical model familiar to us is that of several and roughly equal power precariously seeking to achieve and maintain a state of equilibrium. In the work of the Kautilya, we shall search in vain for a balance of power theory, but we do find it an abstracted conception of international system embodied in the idea of mandala, commonly translated as the circle of states. The concept of the mandala occupies a prominent places both in Hindu and the Buddhist writing, but in relation to international politics, it has been most fully developed in the Arthashastra chapter 7 2. It could be described succinctly in modern terms as the model of a loose bicentric international system. uh, Kautilya takes on his point of reference the Bijugishu, the ambitious king, and the posits as being in a state of constant opposition to him, actual or potential. The Ari, the kings who are immediate neighbors of the Bijugishi, were developing further the axiom that neighborhood entails actual and the potential opposition of or enmity. He deems the king want the Ari to be enemy of Ari and therefore befriend Mitra of the Vijugishi, and the Mitra's never in his turn to be a friend of Ari or enemy of Mitra. To his rear, to the Vijugishi has alternately an enemy, a friend, and an other enemy and another friend, each one of whom is identified by a special Sanskrit term. Over and above these committed states, Kautilya recognized the special position of the two types of the non-aligned powers, Madhyama or mediatory king, who occupies a territory close to both the ambitious one and his immediate enemy in front, and who is capable of helping both the kings, whether united or disunited, or of resisting resisting either of them individually, and also the neutral or detached. Udasina, the king situated in the territory, or either kings detached and very powerful. Each of the four primary kings, Bijigusu, Ari, Madhyama, Udasin, may serve as the center or the focus of a circle of a state. To this ensemble of the state and the circles are be justified in applying the concept of the international politics. Kautilya's purpose and orientation were those of an advisor to a king and coming and ambitious king to be sure, but only one king among many, as problems were those of maintaining and improving his king's position rather than those of society of states as a whole. Issues of international peace and order were secondary to him, and he did not have to write about them in the same detail he used in his foreign policy analysis. But even this subsidiary area, he could not help coming upon the question of system-wide significance. The concept of the circle of a state or mandala is is his principal device for dealing with them, but there is room for differing interpretations on the reading of some passage. One can argue that by the circle of states, Kautilya means no more than the three kings who are each other's friends: Vijugesi, his friend Mitra, and the friend's friend. In other words, the Vijugesi's friendship alliance system. This understanding of the concept is confirmed by a number of other passages. For instance, when the Vijugesi is seen to gain the good grace of a circle of states by allowing them generous spoils of war, or when various possibilities of the forming a circle of states are discussed, or when troubles within one's circle are concentrated with those of enemies circle of states, the concept of the friend and enemy are examined, and the distinctions are drawn between various types of natural and acquired friends and enemies, and they occupy a prominent places in various parts of the treaties. And insofar as both the friends and the enemy are two of the elements of the state featured at the very onset of this discussion, the theory of mandala must be seen as the continuation of Cautilya's foreign policy analysis. There are equally numerous passages in which the circle acquires and carries a generalized and more universal meaning. There are, for instance, references to the pressure of opinion exercised by it in the direction of the considerate treatment for submissive kings, or against breaking treaties and destroying friends. Kautilya declares that the Vijugisu may attack the Madhyama king only if the circle of states has turned against the latter and is favorable to Vijugisu's cause. This apparent contradiction may be resolved if we may assume that Kautilya's writings were we witness an evolution in the concept of the international society. We see the idea of the minimum solidarity community, which is implied in that of the international system, evolving by extension from the king's friends to all the rulers the king is in contact with. In other words, the emphasis shifts gradually from friends to all other immediate enemies. In Kautilya's work, the solidarity community aspect of the international system appears in an explicit way, mostly in the negative sense of a body of opinion whose views must be taken in account of, and which therefore put a limit upon the freedom of the foreign policy. Below we shall note some other factors of the solidarity which are implied in the various parts of the treaties. On balance, Kautilya's circles of states may be regarded as the germ of the concept of an international society. Looking more closely at his formulations, we see him delineating a distinct model of the international system, though admittedly it is only one of a number of possible models. We might call it a checkerboard model, because the basis of it is the proposition that one's neighbor is one's enemy, and the one's neighbor's enemy is therefore one's obvious friend. This regular alternation between friends and enemies produces for the system a checkerboard effect. The location determinism implied in the quadrilateral circus may need to be qualified, and was in fact qualified in the Arthashastra. Friendship and enemy are not solely determined by positions, but the checkerboard is still a more illuminating model of the world politics than the block pattern recently in the vogue. And other aspects to the mandal is superior to current, but in fact cruder model of loose bipolar systems. It depart from the idea that the two major powers in an international systems must occupy in relation to each other polar position, and that is places at the two extremes of a spectrum of the political locations. Rattler, it indicates that the geographically and otherwise they may both be close to the center to the international system, each to the hub of the circle of a state, but the two hub close to each other. Kautilya's distinction between the two types of the non-alignment of the mediatory king and of neutral indifferent king to appears as an attractive feature of a scheme. On these grounds, loose bicentricity appears as a more discriminating, if still highly abstract scheme of an international system than loose bipolarity. We have so far sought to reproduce the structure of the thought relating to international relations and the made explicit in the Arthashastra, and we have identified the mandala as a uh, notable, if partial contribution to the understanding international system. Kautilya's other references to problems of an international system are no more than those which are incidental to answering questions arising out of conduct of foreign policy. We may nevertheless confirm from these further references that our rudimentary conception of the such an agrarian system is implied in the Arthashastra, and that its chief element other than the mandala are those which indicate that the system possessed definite geographical scope, that it gave evidence of integration and solidarity, and that is embraced attempts to cope with the international order, that the international system within which Kautilya's parents exercise their states seeking exist in a world of its own is indicated in a number of passages. The Arthashastra refers several times to those who will conquer the earth, and the earth bounded by the four quarters, and in another place it indicates that this earth is to be understood roughly as the Indian subcontinent south of Himalaya, which is physical setting of the Kautilya's international relations and the arena in which Vijayusha could exercise his ambition. If the concept of the circle of a state is to be endowed with the meaning of international system, we must assume that the mandal would encompass a significant part of this earth, which these geographically confined states were interrelated in a variety of ways. There, uh, there was of course trade, and Kautilya's comment upon trade routes both by land and sea, upon tolls and the customs arrangements, and upon the commodities subject to trade. There was also migration, and Kautilya not only mentions the superintendent of passports as a separate government officer, but also refer to the phenomenon of migration caused by the unfavorable political conditions. Then, as now, migratory movements were taken to be an index of domestic stability and political international success. Political contact was maintained at two levels. At the official level, there were envoys sent from one king to another. Kautilya distinguishes three grades. His account of the duty stress the faithful conveyance of the king's message, but enlarged at even greater length upon the need to gather information to make friends at the host king's court and to learn about the nature of internal conflict with the view to facilitating subversion. Diplomatic contacts of this type do not seem to have led to the elaboration of a systematic system of diplomatic conventions. At the non official level, there were resident and the itinerant agents in other kingdoms maintained for purpose of intelligence and estimating the state of opponents' element of power, and for formatting dissensions and the maintaining contact with the disaffected. Proportionality and Kautilya pays much more attention to the espionage than to diplomacy, and recommends the use of spies and secret agents not only in the external relation but even more thoroughly for purpose of controlling the country and checking upon government official and the execution of official order. However, there is a little in Kautilya that would indicate the existence of stable patterns of collaboration among the princes. Diplomacy, as mentioned, seems rudimentary and unregulated. There was no references to meeting of or congress congresses of kings or their ministers. Family links between the courts seems weak and less prominent than those known to have obtained in the other agrarian international system. There are some references to gifts of girls in marriage, etc. But the rules of caste and the practice of the early marriages may have reduced this potential area of international dealing. Discussing problems created by the sudden death of the king, Kautilyas include messengers of friends and enemies among those to whom the minister displayed the newly installed king and to whom he should make promises of increased benefit. Here are the elements of the practice of recognition, but the dangers inherent in regular exchange of the royal visits proper and strikingly illustrated in the same chapter when Kautilya suggested that those among neighboring kings who threatened travel at such a critical moment to be invited on the pretext of attending a festival, a wedding or element hunt or by some other uh, use and then captured or even killed. The atmosphere of the suspicion engendered by such practices, together with the difficulties which questions of the ranking and the precedence must have posed in this status conscious society, tended to reduce the range of the contacts between the rulers and thus minimize the growth of international solidarity. While it is apparent that it was not used for neighboring kings to be invited to attend festivals and ceremonies, it is unlikely that this served as a major opportunity for developing solidarity between kings, if only because of the dominant role played in them by priestly caste. The Brahmins, Kautil says very little about the ceremonies and sacrifice, such as the coronations of the king's inauguration, Rajasuya, and and such other accounts of these occasions are available. We search in vain for evidence of the participation ritual and the otherwise of other sovereigns. Attendance at the festival or ritual events was regarded as amounting to an acknowledgement of the superiority of the host king, and the Ashwamedh ceremony for the inauguration of a ruler of superior status, for instance, included 100 princes as a means of symbolizing the power of the king performing the sacrifice. That is why the ceremonies could not easily serve as the medium for the development of the relations between powers of equal status. Such elements are as they were binding the system together and must therefore have come not from the royal house but from the homogeneity of the social system as a whole, and above all from the caste system and its principal custodian, beneficiary, and the Brahmins. The maintenance of that system was the element which made for solidarity between Hindu states and set them apart from the non-Hindus. Kautilya outlines the essentials of the caste system at the very outset of his book and enjoins the king never to allow people to sever from their duties to preserve the customs of the Aryans and to follow the rules of caste and the divisions of the religious life. But the Brahmins also had some specific functions to perform, such as the maintenance of culture and communications within the Hindu international system. There is in Kautilya's the suggestion that the official envoys, hence the personnel of diplomacy, were Brahmins. Some of the king's spies and the secret agents too were of the priestly caste. It seems implied in the chapter on royal rates, second 10, that such royal communications, including diplomatic notes, were couched in the Sanskrit. Brahmins, who were true preservers of that language, would then be needed for writing and interpreting them, and we may infer them therefore that this was the language of the Hindu diplomacy and the international language of that system, to the extent that of the observance of the treaties was guaranteed by Solomon oath. And the Brahmin priest too would have a part and the maintenance of the international obligations. The functioning of the international system and the degree of solidarity with it the spended depended on the considerable degree upon the Brahmins. But we must note that this within the caste system, the Brahmins had a position superior to the warrior, from whom most of the kings were recruited. A consolidation of kingly power, possibly through international contacts and collaboration, a process that occurred in the other international system, would have tended to reduce the standing of the highest caste. It may well be that it is because of the Brahmins' functions in the field of diplomacy, culture, and communication that international solidarity of the Hindu world remained at a low level. Problems of international order in a system whose solidarity was maintained in such precarious circumstances, and in which, moreover, the aspirations to high status were pursued with near complete rootlessness, and the problem of preserving a semblance of international order must have been particularly important. What has Kautilya to say about this? A laissez-faire connection of the international system depicts order as the byproduct of the unhampered interplay of the state members of it, each king his own and his friend's policeman. This picture is to some extent worn out in the Arthashastra. It may be deduced from it that members of the circle or the states did exercise some restraint upon the accusative and expansionist tendencies of the rulers. They would condemn wealth acquired by the breaching treaties or destroying friends. They would regard it as a provocative if the victorious kings coveted the land and the property, sons and wives of defeated princes. The ministers of such rulers might take refuge within the circle and receive support for this subversive intrigue intrigues against him. This does not amount to a doctrine of the international morality, but it is the evidence for existence of a certain amount of pressure favoring the maintenance of order. There were minimum functions only and entirely unspecialized, but there was one exception in that the theory of mandala implies that in the bicentric rotation some regulatory functions might be fulfilled by the mediatory and possibly even the indifferent king. Both are powerful, but the prestige and the status enjoyed by the mediatory king and hinted at in some passage seen attributable not only to his powers but also to system-wide functions performed by him. This, however, remains largely unexplained except for the allusion contained in the very name Madhyama, mediator or middle king. Clearly, this is insufficient. The agrarian international system, which is implied in the Kautilya's analysis, calls for more elaborate provisions for the maintenance of order. We may ask, to what extent did the Hindu international system exploit, for purpose of assuring its own stability, the hierarchical features previously referred to? And all social system, the ranking order is of course a regulatory device of considerable importance. What while Kautilya and his princes are evidently more conscious of relative status of rulers, there is but scant evidence in his work that these inequalities became enshrined in the legitimate and recognized international stratification systems, such as, for instance, we witness in modern international society, with its fairly clear distinction between the great and small powers, each possessing well understood rights and obligations, while status seeking was obviously important, and the status that was held out as goal was not an orderly progression through a number of grades as Some hierarchical societies might have solved this problem, but rather all or nothing goal and the conquest of the world. No system of the ranking can be extracted from Kautilya, uh, but we can say that the role of the Vijayageshu, which he examines in some details, has implied in its rights and the duties which contain the element of authority role within that international society system. The Vijayagisa has sometimes been rendered as the conqueror and the ideal which guided and inspired him dominion over the four corner of the world as empire. These terms have led to confusion because some interpreter of the relevant passages and the arsas have read into them the suggestion that the acquisition of superior status so keenly pursued by the Vijayageshu led to extensive conquest, large scale occupation of territory, replacement of the ruling dynasties, and the establishment of alien administration. It has been pointed out that this is not a correct reading of Arthashastra or of historical situation than a rule of prevailing. There were indeed cases of outright conquest, and in one of his last chapter, Kautilya suggests rules for the restoration of the peace and order in a conquered country. He advocates moderation and the minimum of the change, but such cases were exceptional. The just conqueror, Bijugis, is satisfied with mere obeisance. And Kautilya's system, the assertion of the superior status brought not conquest but submissive cooperation, or as expressed in the policies of the Sandhi and Samarasya, to which the bulk of the international analysis was devoted. The victor who seized the land or property of the defeated ruler could incur the open hostility of the whole circle of the state. The conquest of the earth thus meant little more than the acknowledgement of the superiority of one ruler by other princes. The formal expression of the claim to superiority was the celebration of an elaborate year-long horse sacrifice, the Aswamegh, in a complex ritual which have already had occasion to mention. 100 horses were released and allowed to wander. They were guarded by 100 princes, an indication of the superior status of the sacrificer. The horses had to pass through territories and realm over which it was intended to assert supremacy. The entrance of the sacrificial horse implied a challenge to its ruler. A powerful king ran little risk of his horses being seized and could vindicate his claim to supremacy. The conqueror of the Hindu world was therefore no more than the ruler who has been recognized as being dominant within it or within an important section of it. He was the king of kings, but not the ruler of tightly administrated empire. Even the modern empire, which seems to have had something of an administrative service, is not really an exception, and it lasted less than 150 years. The rights of the Vijayageshu would be governed by the type of accommodation he reached with the submissive uh, princes, but would usually include the authority to issue approval of such activities as the acquisition of the new property, celebration of the marriage, royal succession, construction of the defensive works, trade in horses, and capture of elements. As permission would also have to be secured if an attack were to be launched. Such a relationship had in its undoubtedly an element of control over the maintenance of order, but this element was never large. The mere assertion of the superiority, unaccompanied by the exercise of direct control, was never lasting. The Ashwamedh sacrifice had to be often repeated, and challenge implied in it led to the frequent conflicts. The status of protection accepted by lesser kings did not stop them from pursuing their interest even to the extent of waging war. Kautilya follows up his brief account of the duties of the protected ruler, with a chapter detailing the ways in which such a ruler may be proceed to attack other kingdoms. Nowhere do we find a hint that the rights of the superior kings were exercised toward the moderating conflict or ambitious or by arbitrating or settling disputes. Internal system and social structure. We are led to the conclusion that the Kautilya's own showing neither the problem of solidarity nor the authority or order were satisfactorily solved in the Hindu world, especially in the view of the disruptive process at work within it. Are we to believe that Kautilya constructed an inherently unstable system? And part number, the element of the stability and solidarity within his system must be supplemented with greater emphasis upon that which we have already hinted at, the strength of the social structure underlying the Hindu world. The basic unit of the structure was the village, and the remained unchanged of the millennia. The stability of the village was in turn conditional upon the stability of the caste system dominated by the Brahmins. The specifically diplomatic function of the Brahmins mentioned by the Kautilya have previously been alluded to. It remains to point out that in addition, the Brahmins performed other generally crucial functional functions which help to maintain the uh, cohesion of the system, by contrast with the notable lack of the contact and the communication between the other elements of it. The Brahmins were the only system-wide agency of culture and solidarity. Their most important role in the field must easily have been in education. This was their responsibility at the local level and included the training of all male members of the twice born caste, especially of the son of the Brahmins and of princes. On the system level, certain cities, Banaras and Takshila in the north in the particular, served as the centers of learning, becoming famous for their learned teachers and acquiring veritable colleges. Their students included princes from distant regions. The Brahmins' freedom to travel and the predilection for doing so assured the continuous dissemination of the culture over wide area and the maintenance of contact between the centers of learning and the religious and of religious and of also political life. Their other key functions was of course in status, ceremonial and sacrifices which formed such an essential feature of Hindu life. In this, Brahmins priest had a dominant position and acted in effect as the representative of the international Hindu system. And Vedic texts, the names of kings were subdued the earth are given together with those of the priest who consecrated them. The sanction of the priest was naturally required before the king. By performing such sacrifices as the Ashwamedh laid a claim to increase international status. The presence of Brahmins seemed to offset the absence of other sovereigns from the ceremonies, features which we noted and commented upon at an earlier stage. The sanction of the priests was needed too before the king entered into international arrangements or embarked upon hostilities. The latter, in particular, requiring elaborate ritual preparation. The social primacy of the Brahmins indeed served as the main check upon the royal power. The excessive growth of this power, for instance, in an integrated empire, would endanger the influence of the Brahmins and such the caste system to a greater degree that than explained in the Kautilya. The stability of the Hindu international system was thus assured by its social structure, but this is not the whole answer. The India India presents a paradox of the student and a sharp contrast between the strength of the social structure and the fluidity of its potential and international systems. How do we account for this. The hypothesis has been advanced by the Eric J. Miller, and that a necessary correlated rigid caste system is a system of territorial segmentation which has two functions. It promotes localized and interdependent relations between the castes, especially at the village level, while limiting the spatial range of the intercaste relations for all castes, and it supports the hierarchical order of the caste by uh, permitting greater mobility and the greater spatial range of intercaste relation for those at the top of the scale than for those at the bottom. If we substitute as we must for system of the territorial segmentation the term international system, we all see that the main body of the hypothesis is borne out by our own analysis of Cattle's writings, but we cannot accept this hypothesis without qualifying it as follows. Not every international system is compatible with a rigid caste system, but only that which exhibit the feature brought out by our analysis of Kautilya. Low international solidarity maintained by the context of the highest caste which performs priestly functions and the international authority of the interminant and the generally ineffective king. Low caste solidarity was an important feature of Hindu world and came into play strengthening when its external integrity came to be periodically threatened by the barbarian and invader. And the lack of the communication and the absence of the habits of cooperation between the rulers and militated against common actions against intruder external political control thus established restricted in terms turn the power of the kings but not the influence of the Brahmins. Although the Hindu political institutions were notoriously short-lived, the social system remained remarkably stable. Thus one answer to our paradox seems to be uh, that the social stability of the Hindu world was purchased at the price of the international instability and disorder. The Kautilya's distinctly unstable international system served to maintain the caste system. The order of the castes and the rules of the Brahmins were conditional upon a near anarchical system of the petty, though ambitious kingdoms, which frequently deserves no better name than chiefdom, striving after power, incapable of the creating both the resources and the ideology needed for forging broader communities and wider loyalties in the princess process which occurred elsewhere, the creation of the universal empire in China, or the emergence of the system of small numbers of the semi-equal great powers in Western Europe did not take place in the Indian subcontinent, and gradually the Hindu world was observed first in the Muslim at later of European realm. Interesting question remains: is international disorder the price of social stability? Does international peace depends upon continuous social exchange? Whatever the answers may be, Kautilya's Arsas remains with us as an impressive monument to man's ability to reason clarity, if abstractly, about the most complex problem of the social and international affairs.